What's going on, beautiful people? It is Tuesday, August 22nd, and we are through 2 weeks of the preseason, one to go. And after this week, we will have a dormant week where all teams will be away from the facility for the most part, getting ready to rev up for what we love the most, the start of the NFL season. College football right around the corner. It's getting there, man. As we like to say around these parts, it's the most wonderful time of the year. We're getting there. We're getting there. We'll be there before you know it. So another podcast episode, another division down. We're going to spend the vast majority of today's podcast talking about the AFC South, probably the worst division in football. We'll take a look at it nonetheless. You know what it is. It's the LouieTeeNetwork podcast, and it starts now. As the calendar turns to August, it can only mean one thing. The NFL season is right around the corner. And with that in mind, the LouieTeeNetwork exclusives are back like cook crack. Choose from any of the three or all three of the LTN exclusives: Winners and Losers League, Soul Survivor Pool, Weekly Pick'em, all at your fingertips. Links are down in the description along with the video to help you sign up. Don't sit on the sideline. Get in the game. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the 357th installment of the LouieTeeNetwork podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about the AFC South today, and we really got a lot to talk about with this division. It's perfect timing because yesterday news broke that the Indianapolis Colts gave starting star running back Jonathan Taylor the option to seek a trade. Like, go out there, see what you can facilitate. Understand that we're not giving you away. We want a first-round pick or something equivalent to that of a first-round pick in return. So there's so much going on with this division in particular right now. So this is the perfect time to break this division down. Anyway, so without any further ado, don't want to hold you up. Let's get straight to the proceedings this evening and get to the gem dropping session. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up, get you thinking a little bit. And we're talking AFC South. I talked about preseason week number 2, in which we saw CJ Stroud play really well. I thought it was a bounce back week for him and number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young. We did not see, however, Indianapolis Colts top 5 rookie quarterback, Anthony Richardson, which was a bit of a surprise. I'm at a loss. Like, you draft a guy 4th overall, you name him the starter for week 1. He's already beat out Gardner Minshew, and you're not going to play him in the second week of the preseason. Make it make sense to me. Again, the only way to get better at football is to play football. And I don't want to hear this joint practice crap when it comes to a rookie quarterback trying to find his sea legs in the NFL. That just doesn't make any sense to me, but I digress. Let's jump into the AFC South, and we start with the team that was at the top of this division last year. And you know what's really ironic? I think the AFC South is a great example of what we talk about with the quarterback position. We talk about how quarterbacks are really the lifeline of any organization. If you have a guy at the quarterback position, it transcends everything. It changes the way that you're viewed in the public perception. Just think about this division as a whole, say 5 years ago, right? Andrew Luck is the starting quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts. They're one of the best franchises, not just one of the best teams, one of the best run franchises in football. You have Deshaun Watson in going into his second year. We see him as a budding star in the NFL going into year 2 or 3, 5 years ago. And the Titans were kind of on the tail end of the Marcus Mariota experiment. And the Jaguars were just kind of floating around in the abyss, right? They sucked. They didn't have a guy. All right. And that's where everyone was. And this division was viewed in a totally different light. At one point, we looked at the Texans as a legit, Super Bowl contender with Deshaun Watson. We definitely viewed Indianapolis in that light when they had Andrew Luck. And the Titans, they were dangerous. We didn't really believe in Marcus Mariota, but they won a playoff game on the road against Kansas City. So, and they still had Derrick Henry. And so they were a dangerous team. Well coached, quality defense, all of that good stuff. But now you fast forward 5 years, and this division is upside down. The Colts are a mess. They might have the worst owner in football. Jim Irsay is a mess, and he's created a situation that was very avoidable in Indianapolis. We don't know about their quarterback situation. They got a brand new head coach. We'll see where that goes. They got a GM that's on the hot seat. So we don't know what the hell's going on with Indianapolis. You have the Houston Texans. They've turned over everything. A GM that's going into, I believe, year 2 of his tenure. You got a brand new head coach. You got a brand new starting quarterback, a roster that's ever changing. And so they're trying to figure some things out and connect some of the dots in Houston. You got the Tennessee Titans, who they're kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place. They don't want to rebuild. They don't want to hit a hard reset. But you're not going to win anything with Ryan Tannehill. Like that, you've maxed out what this team can be with Ryan Tannehill. You go out and get DeAndre Hopkins. You try to make sure that you're still competitive, but you've already got Malik Willis and Will Levis behind him, and you don't really know if either one of them are good enough to be your starting quarterback moving forward either, but you're kind of stuck, right? Want to be competitive. You know your division isn't that good, so you feel like you can still win it, but how far can you truly go with what you have, right? And then there's the Jacksonville Jaguars. You go out last year, you get Doug Peterson. He comes in year 1. He changes things. They turn it around. They got Trevor Lawrence. They got their franchise quarterback. They've built this roster up. They feel really good. They won the division. They won a playoff game, and they almost went to Arrowhead and pulled off the unthinkable. And so now everybody's feeling good about them. And only thing that changes, they got a quarterback. And it does help to have a Super Bowl winning head coach. But I digress. Let's jump into these schedules and look at everybody's situation, and let's kind of predict what we think is going to happen in this division this season. So the Jacksonville Jaguars won this division last year, winning 5 straight games to wrap up the season. This was a team that looked like they were dead in the water at 5-8 at one point, 4-8 at one point. And, they just turned it around. They started playing confident football, and it really started to go the right way when Trevor Lawrence started to play confident football, and they just followed his lead. So they roared back, won the division. We're down 27-0 in the wild card weekend at home to the Los Angeles Chargers, roared back and won that football game in incredible fashion. And so here they are, 9-8, division winners a season ago, feeling really good about themselves. Let's see what their offseason look like this year. So let's look at the losses for the Jaguars in the offseason. Shaquille Griffin is now a member of the Houston Texans. Marvin Jones, who was a big part of their resurgence last year, just one of those veteran receivers that I just love. He's back in Detroit where he was before he got to Jacksonville. Arden Key, who played really well. He really reinvigorated his career last year with the Jaguars, is now in Tennessee. So you see a lot of the movement within the division. You see that quite often in the NFL. Chris Manhertz, who's one of the better blocking tight ends in the NFL, now in Denver. Dan Arnold is now a Philadelphia Eagle. And he was a guy that you traded for to see if you could come in and really help jumpstart this offense as well. Jawan Taylor was a big free agent get for the Kansas City Chiefs. So you lose your starting right tackle in free agency. He got some big money. You weren't willing to spend what it was going to take to keep him in Jacksonville. See if there anybody else that's notable. And Riley Patterson, your kicker from a season ago, is now in Detroit. So let's look at any additions. And the Jags kept it relatively clean. When you feel good about your team, but more importantly, when you have 13 selections that you're about to make in the upcoming draft, you're not going to be as aggressive in free agency. They franchise tagged Evan Ingram and then got a long-term deal done with him. Roy Robinson Harris is back on that defensive line. Dewan Smoot, same thing. Brandon McManus comes over, big leg kicker. Really, that's an upgrade over Riley Patterson from a year ago if we're keeping it a buck with one another. As you continue down the list, let's see if there are any more names that ring a bell. Adam Gotsis is back on that D-line as well. Josh Wells comes over from Tampa Bay to help give you some depth on the offensive line. I like Dearness Johnson as a running back coming over from Cleveland, so that's a nice little addition there. Michael Dogbay comes over, helps on that defensive line and give you some more depth. See, and that's it. I mean, really, you already had a lot of what you look at as your core group of players already on the roster. And again, you're adding depth. You're adding guys via the draft. You move on from Jawan Taylor. You draft Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. He's a plug-and-play type of player, and he'll come in and he's going to start it for you at tackle. So you feel really good about the things that you add. And I've always said this about Jacksonville. Jacksonville and Cincinnati in particular are two teams that – and I usually like to throw Dallas in there as well, but of late, I've kind of distanced myself from the Cowboys because they've become like a Seattle Seahawk type of team where they try to prove that they're the smartest team in the room. Jacksonville and Cincinnati are teams that I feel like they just keep it simple. They just draft talented football players. Whether they need them or not is irrelevant. We're just going to draft the most talented guys, and we'll figure out the rest later. But let's just get talented football players. Cincinnati does that as good as anybody, and I feel like Jacksonville is not that far behind. And you look at this draft, it's loaded with quantity, but not necessarily over quality. I think there are some good football players in this draft and guys that will be able to come in, help right away, and then some other guys that may need a little bit of development. But when it's all said and done, this is a really solid haul of football players here. Anton Harrison, as I mentioned, Brenton Strange, who lit up the combine as an athlete at the tight end position out of Penn State, Tank Bigsby, running back out of Auburn, Ventrell Miller, one of those leader type of guys at the linebacker position out of Florida, Tyler Lacey, defensive end out of Oak State. Again, you just go down the list of all these players. This is a really interesting haul. And guys, I really think they're going to see 4 or 5, upwards of 6 guys out of this draft class that are going to be able to come in and immediately contribute to this team in one way or another. So if you're Jacksonville, you feel really good about what you did last year. You're building on that. And not to mention, don't forget, they made a trade last year for suspended wide receiver Calvin Ridley from the Atlanta Falcons. He's now back. And I thought that's what they were missing last year. You know, a guy that could be the number 1 wide receiver. I love what they got out of the Arizona Cardinal receiver that they acquired. He spent a bunch of money in free agency last year in Christian Kirk to get. And he played well for them. But I think Christian Kirk's a high level too. And they need a number 1. And now you have it potentially. If he picks up where he left off, the Falcons thought they were comfortable with moving on from Julio Jones because they felt like Calvin Ridley could be that number 1 wide receiver. And then he got into trouble for betting on the NFL. So now he's in the mix in Jacksonville. Christian Kirk, you have Zay Jones, you have Evan Ingram, you've got weapons for Trevor Lawrence. And don't forget Travis Etienne, who played well last year at the running back position. There's a wealth of talent in Jacksonville. They're well coached with a former Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson. We saw the impact he had last year. You add this draft into the mix. You're feeling really good about Jacksonville right now if you're a Jags fan. So let's take a look at the Jaguars schedule and see what we think they can do this season. So remember, this is one of the teams that plays overseas every year. It's almost as if Jacksonville is one of the the UK home teams, so to speak. They play overseas every single year. So at Indy week 1, that's a big one if you're Jacksonville. You got to go on the road and beat a Colts team that is young, trying to figure some things out, new head coach, new quarterback. You cannot go in there and lay an egg week 1. You have to set the tone for this season. If you're going to win the division, if you're Jacksonville, you got to beat teams and sweep teams like Indianapolis. And it starts week 1. You have a home date with Kansas City week number 2. That's a big game. That's a rematch of the divisional round, a game that you were right there in. A late fumble in that game really cost you. an opportunity to have a shot. But you got to like your chances if you're Jacksonville of really playing competitive football against Kansas City and just seeing where the chips fall, right? Let them fall where they may. You got Houston in week 3 at home. And again, so 2 out of your first 3 games are in the division, and you got to and they're against the bottom tier of your division. It's not Tennessee, it's Indy and it's Houston. You have to win both of those games. If you don't beat Kansas City, you need to start the season off 2-1. And then you get we'll call it a home date because it essentially is against Atlanta in week 4. You have back-to-back. I don't know if the NFL has ever done this. I think this might be the first year or last year might have been the first year. I can't remember if last year was or if this year is the first year where a team stays over in London and plays back-to-back games. I think Jacksonville did it last year, if I'm not mistaken. So this is the second consecutive year that they've stayed across the pond, if I'm not mistaken, and played back-to-back games over in London. And so the first of which will be against the Atlanta Falcons, a very winnable football game. Matter of fact, I think you played the Falcons. I don't think it was last year. I think Matt Ryan was still there when you guys played them. So I want to say it was 2 years ago. You played the Falcons, and that was a fun game over there that I think you guys pulled out right at the end. The Jags pulled out right at the end with a late field goal. And then you have the Buffalo Bills the following week after that over across the pond. That's going to be a tough one. So in the first 5 games, you played 2 big-time AFC opponents, and then you had 2 division games as well in that mix. It's going to be an interesting start. We're going to find out a lot about Jacksonville in the first 5 weeks of the season. Now, we can't write them off. They were 4-8 last year before getting hot and winning 5 straight and coming back and winning that division. So you can't write them off even if they start slow. But we'll find out a lot about Jacksonville over the first 5 weeks of the season. You come home from being across the pond for 2 straight weeks, and you get Indy for the second time, this time at home, and you're done with the Colts by week 6. So if you're Jacksonville, got to take care of business. 3 of your first 6 games are against divisional opponents. You have to take care of business within this division if you plan on winning this division. Week 7, Thursday night football at the Saints. That should be really interesting. Week 8 at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then you go and get your bye in week number 9. You come off that bye. You are home for the San Francisco 49ers. Then you're home for the Tennessee Titans. The first time you have seen the Titans all season long. So you don't see the Titans until week number 11 at home. Then you are at the Texans for the final time you see the Texans in 2023. And then after that, Monday Night Football, week 13 against the Cincinnati Bengals at home. And so this is what you get when you win the division, right? You get Buffalo, you get Kansas City, you get Baltimore, Cincinnati. Like, you don't get to play Cleveland this year. You know, you don't get to play well, you don't want to play the Jets this year, but you don't get to play, the New England Patriots or someone that you may be able to handle. You got to play the big boys this year. If you want to be a big boy, then you have to play with the big boys, and we'll see how they fare in these games. That's a Monday nighter at home late in the season. That could ultimately be a fun game with maybe some playoff implications. Who knows? At Cleveland the following week, home for the Ravens on Sunday Night Football. So this was a franchise in Jacksonville who probably didn't have a primetime game at home, on a non-Thursday night primetime game, I should say, because everybody got one of those. Probably haven't played a home Monday or Sunday night football game in ages. And here they are with a Monday night game and a Sunday night game in a 3-week span. They're playing on Monday night and then Sunday night twice in a 3-week span at home, no less. So it just goes to show you how the NFL feels about this Jaguars team. Week 16 at Tampa Bay, week 17 home for Carolina, and then you finish up the season week 18 at the Titans. That could be for the division, as I see the Titans as the only other team that is going to be somewhat competitive in this division with the Jaguars. This was a 9-win team last season. I think they're even better. They know what to expect with Doug Peterson. They're in year 2 of everything with Peterson, defense, offense. They're much more comfortable. Lawrence has established himself as a legit NFL, upper tier quarterback. I think they improve upon that 9-8 record and improve to 10-7 this year and win the division with that mark. I don't think this is a good division. And in order for them to win 10 games and win this division, they're going to need to clean up in the AFC South. You're shooting for 5-1. That's the mark. Anything less than 5-1 is disappointing. 4-2 would still get you where you want to go. But honestly, 5-1, 6-0 is what you should be shooting for if you're Jacksonville. This division is not good, and you need to take advantage of them. You should be sweeping both the Colts and Texans, and you split with Tennessee, and you should feel good about that. So 10-7 is what I have for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's take a look now at the second place team in this division, and that is the Tennessee Titans. So Titans last year started off the season 7-3. I talked so much shit about the Titans before the season last year and said they weren't going to be good. They weren't going to be this. They weren't going to be that. And then they were 7-3, and I looked like I was going to have egg on my face. And then they decided after they went to Philadelphia and A.J. Brown took a massive dump all over them, they lost their minds, fired their GM, and all hell broke loose. It was pure pandemonium. They lost 7 straight to finish up the season. Ryan Tannehill got injured, and they finished the season 7-10. They didn't win another game the rest of the year. It was crazy, which I think they got what they deserved. They had no business firing their GM at that point of the season. They could have waited till the offseason if they were that upset and frustrated with him at how their roster had evolved or de-evolved. They could have waited until the offseason for that. They didn't have to fire him right there on the spot after getting their doors blown off by the Eagles. But nonetheless, they finished the season up 7-10, missed out on the playoffs for what feels like the first time in forever. And now they're looking to, kind of pick up the pieces and figure some things out. They actually had a really aggressive offseason, which is not the MO of the Titans. They lost some guys in free agency, but they also went out and spent some money in free agency as well. Let's take a look at what they did. So let's start with the players that they've lost. So they lost Bud Dupree, which he was a disappointing signing. They thought they were going to get a lot more out of him when they got him from the Steelers. He's now in Atlanta. Robert Woods was, remember, he was coming off of an injury. So I don't think they got the best of Robert Woods when they traded for him. And when they traded for him, he was supposed to be running side by side with A.J. Brown. He wasn't supposed to be coming over and being a de facto one, because the guy that they drafted to replace A.J. Brown was in and out of the lineup with injuries and wasn't really ready at that time to be a number one. So I think Robert Woods got a raw deal in Tennessee. He's now in Houston. Taylor Lewan has essentially retired, pseudo-retired. Zach Cunningham is now a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. Austin Hooper is now a member of the Las Vegas Raiders. Jeff Swain is now a member of the Arizona Cardinals. Dennis Daly is now a member of the Cardinals as well. And you will see some of these players moving on to Arizona because the assistant GM, he went to Arizona and to be their GM, Ozenfort. So obviously he's going to take a few players along with him as he moves on to Arizona. And that's why you see the Cardinals in the mix here quite a bit when you're talking about players departing Tennessee. Let's see if there are any more notable names. I know there's one that I wanted very badly. DeMarcus Walker is now a Chicago Bear. Chris Conley is now a San Francisco 49er. Mario Edwards Jr. is now a Seattle Seahawk. I'm so glad they moved on from Randy Bullock. I'm not a Randy Bullock fan as a place kicker. Let's see. Terrell Basham is now in Cincinnati. Joshua Dobbs, who played actually well, even though they didn't win any of those games, played well for them down the stretch. He's now in Cleveland as the backup there. Let's see. LaRaven Clark is now a Steeler to give them some depth. Let's see. Nate Davis was a big free agent signing for the Chicago Bears. I thought they lost a lot on their offensive line, but then they went out and they added pieces to that offensive line to replenish. And then a big loss for me was David Long Jr., going to the Dolphins. I really liked him. That's the guy that I wanted my team to go after in free agency. And then seeing the deal that he got, I was even more PO'd that they didn't make a more aggressive pitch to try and land him. You look at the players they added. DeAndre Hopkins is the biggest name. They just added him literally a week and a half ago. So that gives them a true number one wide receiver. Remember, they have Treylon Burks, who they drafted in the first round last year, who was playing well before he got injured for the second time last year. If he can come back and be what he was before he got injured, and then you add in some of the other little pieces that they have, it could be a solid offense. Not great, but solid offense. I like the receiver, the tight end out of Maryland, Quonkwo, who showed some things last year. So they got some stuff, but they're going to have to put a lot of those pieces of the puzzle together. Let's see what else they added in free agency. Brought back Kevin Byard. He was on a long-term deal. They restructured there. That had a chance to get ugly. I'm glad that it didn't turn ugly. Ben Jones is now gone. I didn't mention him, but that's a loss. So you lose David Long and you replace him with Azeez Al-Shire, who I loved in San Francisco. So he's going to get an opportunity to be a bigger part of the defense in Tennessee. Got a deal done with Jeffrey Simmons. You bring Andre Dillard over from the Eagles, and I'm interested to see how that works. He's been waiting in the wings for quite some time to get an opportunity. Injuries have been an issue for him, and then when he's gotten opportunities, he's been okay, but this is his first real opportunity, in a different environment. There was a lot of pressure on him. He never lived up to being a first-round pick in Philadelphia. I want to see what he does replacing Taylor Lewan in this offense. Chris Hubbard comes over at right tackle. That's another solid addition. You got Daniel Brunskill coming over from San Francisco, some more depth along that offensive line. Let's see. Sean Murphy-Bunting was a big free agent signing from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The secondary really was a problem last year for the Titans, so they aggressively attacked that. Lonnie Johnson Jr. Is gone. He's now a New Orleans Saint. But Sean Murphy-Bunting was a big get. Let's see. Chris Moore is an interesting add at receiver. Ben Neiman comes over, gives you some depth at linebacker. Let's see if there's any more notable additions. Brought back Nick Westbrook-Kine, which is a solid move. Trevon Wesco comes over to kind of give you what you're going to probably lose from a blocking standpoint at the tight end position. The Titans love to run the football. And that's about it. So look at their draft, and they got the best offensive lineman in the draft. If it's one thing the Titans are going to do, is they're going to keep that offensive line, intact. So getting Peter Skoronski was huge. You're going to plug him right in on this offensive line, and he's going to be outstanding for them. Will Levis is interesting. They drafted him. Really don't know what they're going to do with Malik Willis yet. Will Levis is, I think, a bit of a project. They understand that. And so really interested to see how that whole situation sorts itself out. Tajay Spears is going to be a great backup to Derrick Henry and eventually probably take his spot as the lead dog at the running back position. He had a nice little 30-yard run for a touchdown in preseason game number 2. Josh Wiley comes in and is going to help at the tight end position. Remember, they lost Austin Hooper last year. Jalen Duncan going to give them some more depth on that offensive line. They'll develop him, and he'll probably be in there getting some reps at some point. And then Colton Dowell, generally you don't look at a 7th-round pick as a guy that's going to make the team and help you immediately. But Colton Dowell is probably not only going to make this team, but they're probably going to rely on him at some point this season because they just don't have a ton at the receiver position. So that's the Titans draft. That's their offseason. Let's take a look at the Titans schedule. So this schedule for the Tennessee Titans, again, an interesting one because I really don't know what to make of them. I don't think they're going to be very good, but I don't like counting them out, because when you can run the football the way they do, when you can play quality defense as they usually do, and when you're well coached, and you say what you want about Mike Vrabel, they are a well coached football team week in and week out. It gives yourself a chance every week. You give yourself a chance, and so we'll see what happens with them. Week 1 at New Orleans. That's tough. That's going to be a juiced up Superdome, and they got Derek Carr now, and they're feeling good about themselves. At home for week number 2 against the Chargers. You back on the road against Cleveland in week 3. Back home in week number 4 against Cincinnati. At the Indianapolis Colts week 5. So you see your first AFC South opponent in week 5 in the Indianapolis Colts. London game in week 6 against the Baltimore Ravens, and then you come back home and hit your bye in week number 7. You come off that bye and you are home for the Atlanta Falcons. Week number 9, you're at Pittsburgh. Week 10, you're at Tampa. Week 11, you're at Jacksonville. So that is a big stretch where you play 3 straight road games in a row. You have to find a way to navigate that portion of the schedule. We'll see how you do there. You're home for Carolina in week number 12. You're home for Indy in week 13. That Pittsburgh game that kicks off that 3-game road streak that you're on is a Thursday nighter. So you're on the road at Pittsburgh on a Thursday night. That's going to be tough. Week 11, week 14 rather, excuse me. You're at Miami on Monday Night Football. Week 15, home for Houston. Week 16, home for Seattle. Week 17, at Houston. Week 18, you finish up the season home for Jacksonville. And that could have playoff implications at the end of the season. So honestly, this is not a brutal schedule, but it's not an easy one either. And I don't know if this Titans team is equipped or not to deal with some of the rigors of this schedule. But if they're playing the kind of football that they're capable of playing, I could easily see them winning this division and winning 10 games. But I don't see them playing that kind of football. I don't believe in Ryan Tannehill, even though I like Ryan Tannehill. I don't believe you can get any more out of him than you've already gotten. I think that ship has sailed, and this is it. This is his last hurrah. And I just think that this team is due to hit the reset button here any day now. And so 8-9 is the best I can do for Tennessee this year, as they will finish second in the division, but it will not be good enough to make the postseason. So now we take a look at the Indianapolis Colts, who are in the midst of a tumultuous offseason. They had a failed experiment with Matt Ryan, which prompted them to draft a quarterback. You thought, okay, got a quarterback, you got a new head coach who has experience and really good success with quarterbacks like the one they drafted. This could be a match made in heaven. And then you have issues with your star running back, Jonathan Taylor, to the point now where he does not want to play for your organization and wants to be traded. It's a mess. And so you kind of find yourself back at square one, so to speak, because even if you were struggling with a young quarterback, there was a chance you could ride the legs of JT while he was figuring some things out. And you might have been able to win games off the strength of a top-notch run game and quality defense and some timely offense. It's going to be hard to do that now if there's no Jonathan Taylor. So let's look at their offseason real quick. Obviously, Matt Ryan is gone. He's retired. No more Yannick Ngakoue. He's now a Chicago Bear. No more Stephon Gilmore. He was traded to Dallas. No more Matt Pryor. He's now in San Francisco. Brandon Faison is now a Vegas Raider. Nick Foles is no longer an Indianapolis Colt. He might be pseudo-retired himself. Rodley McLeod is now a Brown. Ben Banigou is now a Cowboy. Dennis Kelly is now an Eagle. Paris Campbell is now a Giant. Chase McLaughlin is now a Buccaneer. You had issues kicking the football last year, so that's also something to keep an eye on. Bobby Okereke is now a Giant. Let's see. So that's pretty much it. And Isaiah Rodgers, was suspended for gambling and then subsequently released. And he looked like a starter for you at corner. So a lot of issues with the Indianapolis Colts right now. You look at the players that they were able to add this offseason, and Samson Ebukam coming over from San Francisco as a very athletic edge. Taven Bryant comes over from Cleveland on that defensive line. Al-Qadim Muhammad, I think he was in Indy at one point. So coming back to Indy after being with Chicago a season ago. Let's see, brought back Tyquan Lewis, Ashton Doolin, who has played some good football for you. Isaiah McKenzie brings an element of speed and quickness coming over from Buffalo. Bashad Perriman coming over from Tampa, size and speed there. Ronnie Harrison coming over from the Browns at the safety position. Amari Rodgers, well-traveled in a very short NFL career, is getting another opportunity in Indianapolis. Let's see, Pharaoh Brown is a big target at the tight end position coming over from Cleveland. Jannard Avery coming over from Tampa Bay at the linebacker position. Kenyon Drake comes over from the Baltimore Ravens. Was it Kenyon Drake that got injured? I swear somebody got injured. It might not be. I don't want to put that on him. Let's see. Tease Tabor, just don't think that's really an impactful move there. Dan Skipper coming over on the offensive line gives you some depth there. And Gardner Minshew coming over from the Eagles as a backup to your first-round pick quarterback, Anthony Richardson, is a solid move as well. So you look at their draft, it was a hearty draft. You're looking at 12 selections by this Colts football team. Anthony Richardson at the top of that draft is a guy that's already been named the starter for week number 1. You got a brand new head coach coming over from Philadelphia, their offensive coordinator a season ago in Shane Steichen. So a lot of changes going on for this Indianapolis Colts football team. Julius Brents comes over as a long-rangey corner. Josh Downs, a speedster out of North Carolina at the receiver position. Blake Freeland, a really solid, athletically gifted tackle out of BYU. Adebayowoye coming over from Northwestern as an edge rusher. Darius Rush at the cornerback position. So this is a really, really solid draft. Will Mallory lit up the combine as a tight end out of the U. Really tested well, a lot better than what people thought he would athletically. Evan Hall, one of those super backs out of Northwestern. So this is a really quality draft. If you're Indianapolis, you just want to see how everything's going to pan out. Everything is really going to hinge upon the success of Anthony Richardson at the quarterback position. If he plays well, this team's going to have a chance to be a lot more competitive than people think in year 1. If he struggles with Jonathan Taylor and that whole entire saga going on, it could be a long season for Indianapolis, and you expect it to be. But if you're Indianapolis, you'd like to fast track some things, and so we'll see what everything turns out to be. They're so young. They're a very, very young football team. So you expect a lot of bumps in the road. So let's take a look at their schedule real quick and see what that entails. And so this looks crazy now with Jonathan Taylor out in the front of this thing and knowing that there's a chance that he won't be there. But I don't see anybody trading for him. So we'll see what happens. Week 1, Jacksonville at home. Week 2 at Houston. Week 3 at Baltimore. Week 4, home for the Rams. Week 5, home for Tennessee. Week 6 at Jacksonville. Let's stop right there. So in your first 6 games, you have 4 divisional opponents. So right away, we're going to find out if you're going to try to be relevant in this division at all, because you got 2 with Jacksonville. You're done with the Jaguars in week 6. And you got 1 with both the Titans and the Texans in that same span of games. So in the first 6 weeks, 4 games in the division, we'll find out what you're made of. And sandwiched in between are dates at Baltimore and home against the Rams. So it could get ugly quick if you're Indy, if you don't take care of business. Week 7, home for Cleveland. Week 8, home for New Orleans. Week 9, at Carolina. Week 10, at New England, excuse me. Then you have a week 11 bye. You come off the bye. You're home for Tampa Bay. Week 13 at Tennessee. Week 14 at Cincinnati. Week 15 home for Pittsburgh. Week 16 at Atlanta. So that's 3 out of 4 on the road right there. So again, that's going to be an interesting stretch for a team that could be, vying for something, or who could be one of the worst teams in football. We'll see. Week 17, home for Vegas. Week 18, home for the Houston Texans. So I don't expect much from Indianapolis, but I do expect them to be better than they were last year. They were 4-12 last season, losers of 7 straight to wrap up the season. And I think that this is a 5-win team. They were a 4-win team last year. I'm going to give them 5 this year, and they'll finish up at 5-11 in this division. So now we take a look at the Houston Texans, and a very interesting offseason, to say the least, for the Texans. You hired DeMeco Ryans as your new head coach away from the 49ers, and you start to build this thing. You draft C.J. Stroud as the face of the franchise, along with Will Anderson on the defensive side in the first round. And you just kind of start building from there. They've been very active in free agency each of the last 2 years. That continued this year. So let's take a look at what the Texans did. So they lost Brandon Cooks via trade to the Dallas Cowboys. See, Jalen Reeves-Maybin is now in Detroit. Double O is now in Cleveland as a member of the Browns. See, Rasheem Green is now a Bear. Kyle Allen is now a Buffalo Bill. Let's see if there are any more notable names. Amari Rodgers, who you pretty much gave up on, is now in Indy. Chris Moore is now in Tennessee. Philip Dorsett, who actually played well in spurts for you last year, is now in Vegas. OJ Howard, it just seems like his career is going nowhere fast. I thought Houston would be a good spot for him. He has not found a new home. Jordan Atkins is now in Cleveland. I thought he actually played well at times for the Texans during his career, showed flashes. And that looks like it's it in terms of notable losses. Now, to the additions, and this is where they've been, a team that's been extremely aggressive. They've been, and it's usually a lot of smaller deals. Laramie Tunsil was not a small deal. You're going to draft C.J. Stroud, you need to protect him. Tunsil got a deal. You also look at the right side of the offensive line, and Tytus Howard got a deal. He's already injured, but he should be back, around the early portion of the season. But those were 2 of the bigger offseason signings to keep guys on that offensive line. Robert Woods comes over. That's going to be a really quality signing for you, I believe. Shaquille Griffin comes over at the cornerback position from Jacksonville. Dalton Schultz is another big-time target you signed on a 1-year deal from Dallas to come over and catch the football. Jimmy Ward comes over as a stabilizing veteran force and presence on the back end of that defense with his former defensive coordinator, now turned head coach, DeMeco Ryans. So that's another good get. George Fant comes over, adds more depth to that offensive line from the Jets. Shaquille Mason is another good addition coming over from Tampa. Malik Collins is re-signed. Sheldon Rankins comes over from the Jets. That's going to help that defensive front stop the run a little bit better. Jacob Martin comes over. So you have all the experience with Jacob Martin, really quality rusher, went to Denver. Now he's back in Houston. Let's see. Case Keenum is back in Houston as well. Comes over and gives you a veteran presence behind C.J. Stroud. Denzel Perryman had a pick in preseason game number 2 off of Tua Tagovailoa. So he's a nice addition from the Raiders at the linebacker position. Corey Littleton also comes over, brings some speed to that linebacker position. Let's see if there's any more names. Hassan Ridgeway adds some quality depth on that defensive line. Noah Brown comes over as another pass catching, more importantly, run blocking target at the wide receiver position. Bring back Derek Rivers as an edge rusher. Rashad Coward comes over as an offensive line depth piece. Nick Van Eck comes over from the Saints at the tight end position. Same with Eric Tomlin, gives you some guys that can block and in Van Eck's case can catch the football a little bit. Devin Singletary comes over. That's a nice little addition to your running back room. Chase Winovich comes over, try to help you get some pressure on the quarterback. That's another nice low-key signing there. Michael Dieter comes over from Miami. You see all of these additions, right? A lot of guys coming over. They're very active in free agency and have been for the last 2 seasons as they continue to turn over this roster. You look at their draft class, C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, both first-round picks. Will Anderson had a hell of a play in the second preseason game where he forced a fumble. He got to the quarterback as he was trying to hand the football off, and the quarterback, it made the quarterback fumble. It was just a crazy play how fast he got in there. Stroud, I thought, played so much better in preseason game number 2. Juice Scruggs out of Penn State. Tank Dell, who I think has number 1 wide receiver written all over him, has already had a really strong performance in the preseason in week number 1. Dylan Horton, Henry To'oTo'o, who I think has a chance to be really, really good. Jaret Patterson, a really solid piece along the offensive line at center. So you see this is a really good draft from the Texans in 2023. All of that turns into their schedule. Let's take a look at that. So week 1, you're at Baltimore. That's tough. Week 2, you're home for the Indianapolis Colts. Week 3, you're at Jacksonville. Week 4, you're home for Pittsburgh. Week 5, you're at Atlanta. Week 6, you're home for the Saints. Week 7, you've got a bye. So I like the nature of the schedule to start home, away, home, or away, home, away, home, away, home. So no, nasty stretches of 3 out of 4 on the road or anything like that, 3 straight on the road. It's a pretty balanced schedule. You see 2 divisional opponents in that stretch, back-to-back weeks 2 and 3. So it's not easy by any stretch, but Atlanta and New Orleans are games, maybe you can sneak. You catch a Baltimore Ravens team in week 1 that's trying to figure out their new offense, and maybe you're able to sneak them with some quality defense. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Obviously, you want to take care of business within the division. You come off the bye at Carolina, home for Tampa Bay, at Cincinnati, home for Arizona, home for Jacksonville, home for Denver. So right there, you see a 3-week stretch where you're home 3 games in a row. So normally, you're going to pay at some point, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. You get 2 straight on the road, which isn't bad, at the Jets, at Tennessee, but then you're home for Cleveland, home for Tennessee, and you finish up at the Indianapolis Colts. I like this schedule for the Houston Texans. I just think that there's so many moving parts with this team. They're so young. It's a first-year head coach. They're going to play hard. When I tell you they're going to play hard, they're going to play hard for DeMeco Ryans. I could see them being 5-11, but I got them at 4-12 right now. I think they're going to go through a lot of growing pains with the young quarterback, with the first-year head coach, with a roster that's turned over yet again. They're going to struggle to find continuity. They're going to make the little mistakes. They're going to miss kicks. They're going to turn the football over. They're going to miss opportunities, and that's the kind of stuff that hurts teams like this. And they're going to ultimately finish the season at 4-12. So that is my AFC South prediction for this division, and I think that this division has a chance to be the worst in football, and the records that I've given you kind of lay that out. But I could also see them being a little bit better than I've given them credit for. I could see Houston winning 6 games under DeMeco Ryans if CJ Stroud plays well. And I think that defense is going to be good. I think that defense is going to be really solid, and they're going to cause problems. I just don't think they're going to score enough points. That's what ultimately boils down to for me, is can they score enough points? And I don't think they will. The Colts, again, it all hinges upon the same thing with Houston, a young quarterback coming in and giving them a spark. If Anthony Richardson, if Shane Steichen can get Anthony Richardson to play the kind of football that he envisions for him right away, it hurts not having Jonathan Taylor. If he doesn't, again, somebody's got to trade for him. Or unless there's a trade, he'll be playing for the Indianapolis Colts this year.
But if he doesn't play for the Colts this year, that's going to hurt them significantly. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to social media maneuvers. I'm a midday marauder. Y'all know what it is. So let's get to the comment section. If there's any comments out there that need to be read, I'm going to take care of them. We're pressed for time today. So if you want to have your comment read, use the hashtag LouieTLive. I'll get to as many of those as I can. But the reality of the situation is I'm only going to really be able to get to super chats. So if you want your comment to be read, use the super chat function to ensure that it happens. So with that said, let's go ahead and get to the comment section. And we start with Mr. Pink. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Let me start by saying thank you for your generosity. Greatly appreciate you, Mr. Pink. I missed you last night, man. It was a fun night last night. Glad that you were able, hopefully you were able to watch it on playback, but glad you were able to join me today, Mr. Pink. Thank you once again for your generosity. Mr. Pink writes, Sam is him. We're trending towards that. You know how I feel about Sam. You know what it is, man. Like, I don't have to tell you. So you know how I feel about Sam and what I think Sam is fully capable of. So a lot of people were saying that last night, though. Sam is him. And look, we're trending in that direction. We got a long way to go. It's preseason. I want to see him do it in the regular season, but I know he's fully capable, and I expect him to do it in the regular season as well. So last night, Sam definitely looked like him. Again, granted, against the Ravens' second and third string defense, I don't care. He shredded them like he was supposed to, and it was a sight for sore eyes. For sure, Sam is looking like him. Reedy Davis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Reedy Davis writes, Lou, should we look in the other LBs that are cut or put on practice squads after the 53-man rosters? I think they would be remiss if they didn't do that, if they didn't scour other rosters to check out the linebacking scene. But as they've shown in the past, I don't think they're going to be hard pressed to go out and pursue other linebackers off of other teams. I don't think they're going to be super aggressive and try. If a guy that they really like comes available, they won't hesitate like they did last year with the defensive lineman John Ridgeway, like they did with the corners, Fields, Castro Fields, and Rashad Wildgoose. They'll poach another young player from someone else's roster that they may have liked. For instance, there was a linebacker out of Arizona State that they really liked, that they thought they were going to be able to sign as an undrafted free agent that ended up somewhere else. I can't remember, like maybe Jacksonville he ended up in or something like that. If he were to get cut, I could see them going out and getting him. They really liked him during the process. Like, I could see them adding him to the mix. So I could see something like that potentially transpiring, but I don't see them getting someone that we can expect to help us right away at the linebacker position. I don't see that happening. Reedy Davis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, I hear the Eagles are loaded at linebacker. I don't think loaded is the right word. They have a bunch of stuff. One of their guys just retired. Miles Jack just retired. They signed him and your boy from the Houston Texans last year. I can't remember his dang on name. The linebacker from Vandy, but yeah, Zach Cunningham. They signed Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack, and they paid him the same amount of money, 1-year deals, and then Miles Jack just retired, and Zach Cunningham, he's all right. I mean, they're not loaded at linebacker. They got a bunch of stuff at linebacker. So, last year they were loaded at linebacker, right? This year, not so much. So we'll see what happens. I don't think I would use the phrase loaded with them at the linebacker position. So that's the last super chat that I see. So we're going to go ahead and move on to garbage time and talk about the Jonathan Taylor situation in Indianapolis. I find this fascinating because we've seen this kind of, evolving over time. And we saw a problem really arise with Jim Irsay's mouth and him, continuing to spout off at the mouth and just not knowing when to say when. And look, when you're the owner of the team, you can say and do whatever the hell you want to do, but there are consequences, as we tell everyone in society. You can say what you want, like Colin Kaepernick. You can do what you want and you can say what you want, but there are consequences for your actions, whether right or wrong. There are consequences for your action, right? He's been blackballed from the NFL. And so Jim Irsay, he owns his team. So he can do and say whatever he wants, but you can't think that you can say or do whatever you want and that there won't be any consequences. There won't be any fallout from that. And Jonathan Taylor was one of the guys that, you look at the running back position and you say, hey, if you're going to stand up for equality for your position group, you need guys like Jonathan Taylor to step up and say, hey, enough's enough. And, look, if he and you know what's crazy, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, I thought he was one of the ones that were safe. I thought he would get paid in Indy. They just seemed like an outfit that would pay their running back, that would take care of one of their own. I just felt that way. I was totally wrong about the situation. Irsay, was talking all kinds of cold, hard cash about how he's not only is he not getting paid, but they're not going to extend him. This, that, and the third. It just he muddled up the situation, made it really murky waters, had a conversation with Jonathan Taylor, a sit down, and Taylor, who had already demanded a trade, was essentially summoned to Jim Irsay's office to talk. And after that talk, he felt even more confident that Indy was not where he wanted to be, and then came out publicly and had his agent demand a trade. Irsay then got into a spat on socials with Jonathan Taylor's agent. I mean, it was a mess. So you saw where this was heading. He then, had an injury, or he was healing from surgery, and the Colts threatened to put him on the non-football, injury reserve, or a non-football reserve list, or whatever it's called, the NFI, I think, non-football injury list. And that could have, jeopardized his 2023 season. It really could have gotten even more ugly than it already had gotten. And so initially, it looked like Irsay was going to take that hard line stance of, we're not trading you. You got one choice, and that's to come play football, or your two choices. You could play with us or play with nobody. But then I think they realized, like, what are we doing here? If he's not going to be back here next year, he doesn't want to be here, we don't want to hold him hostage. Why not get something for him if we can? They're not going to give him away. They've already made it publicly known that, hey, we've given him the autonomy to shop a deal. He can find himself a deal, but don't come back to us with anything less than what is equivalent to a first-round pick. We'll take a 1, or we'll take something that equals a 1. So essentially what they're saying is, either bring us a first-round pick or bring us back a deal that looks like the one the Carolina Panthers got for Christian McCaffrey. That's essentially what they're saying. They got the Panthers got a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 from that McCaffrey deal, which we all looked and said, oh my God, that's a lot for a running back, right? But we know what McCaffrey brings to the table. Schefter put it best yesterday during the Monday Night Football telecast. He said, you're not only paying for Jonathan Taylor once, you're paying for him twice. And that's a hard sell for a team, right? Is to trade. That's the same issue that I think Chargers running back Austin Eckler ran into. It's not that no team around the league would love to add Austin Eckler to their roster, because every team in the league would love to add a player the caliber of an Austin Eckler. The problem is, the Chargers weren't going to just give him away. You were going to have to trade them something for him. And then you're going to have to turn around and pay him, which is the problem that he's currently having in his current situation, is that he wants more money. Same with Jonathan Taylor. He's not happy with his current deal, knowing that the Colts have already told him, there's no future for you here. So why am I wasting my time here? Let me go somewhere else where I know I'm appreciated and I'll be compensated the way that I feel like my play demands that I'm compensated. So you're asking someone to not only give up the capital, the draft capital, you're also asking someone to pay him as well. I think that's a tough ask, especially this close to the season. The Colts know what they're doing. They could have allowed him on the trade block a month ago when this thing kind of first hit the fan. They waited until literally 2 weeks before the start of the regular season to come out and say, oh, yeah, you can seek a trade. That's bullshit, because they know no one's going to trade anything for him at this point of the season. That's what they know. And so they waited until Dalvin Cook found a home and all these running back dominoes kind of settled in. Ezekiel Elliott found a home. Now, all of a sudden, oh, you can go seek a trade. When there were teams who were desperate that could have used the Jonathan Taylor, that might have been interested. Now they've gotten running backs. They're good. So now, oh, you can go look for a trade. There aren't many teams that need a running back at this point. So the Dolphins' name always comes up. They're not trading for Jonathan Taylor. They're not doing it. Okay. Because they didn't want to pay Dalvin Cook. They're not in a position to fork over a bunch of cash to a running back. He's not going anywhere. The Colts think they're slick. You know, they're trying to look like they're trying to play ball with him, but they're not. It's the same thing the Raiders did with Marcus Mariota a couple of years ago when everybody needed a quarterback and Mariota was like, yo, can I go? And they were like, hold on a second. Give us a second. We'll get back to you. And then after everybody went out and signed their free agent quarterbacks, you know, Ryan Fitzpatrick signed with the Commanders and Andy Dalton signed with the Saints. And, you know, this quarterback went here, that quarterback went there. Tyrod Taylor went to the Giants. Everybody went and got theirs. Then the Raiders were like, hey, if you want to go, you can go. And Marcus is like, where the hell am I going to go now? They was like, exactly. So you could take this pay cut or we could cut you and you could struggle to find a home. Which one is it going to be? Like, that's kind of what the Colts just did. Like, they waited until all the seats in this game of musical chairs were full. And then they said, hey, if you want to go, go ahead. You can find a trade partner. So anyway, I digress. It's crazy. So, again, fascinating situation, but I think the Colts already knew how this movie was going to end, which is why they waited so long to make this, you know, situation public. Like, hey, you want to seek a trade? Go ahead. Because there's really nowhere he can go now. Josh Jacobs is about to show up for training camp or show up to the Raiders. I told you he wouldn't be a part of any of the preseason, any of training camp, but he'll be there for week 1. No one's trying to miss checks. No one's trying to miss checks. So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the 357th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I thank each and every single one of you for joining me. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys later on tonight. If you're a Washington fan, I'll be over on Rio's channel along with Ed Oliver and Rico from Street Scores, as we'll all chop it up talking about the burgundy and gold. So if you're not doing nothing later on tonight, 9 o'clock P over on Rio's channel, come and check us out. Pull up. You know what it is. In any event, I'll be back on Thursday. Brand new division that we'll be breaking down and predicting any other news and notes that come out from the NFL. We'll have it all here on the Louie T Network podcast. Until then, you guys take care. God bless and have a good one.
Louie T Network.
Got one more super chat right at the end. Mr. Pink, you got in at the last second. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Mr. Pink writes, was at the game, took a red eye back, HTTR. That's why you weren't on the stream last night. All good, man. You picked a good one to go to. I was talking to somebody else that was there. My guy Twin D had a blast. It was a fantastic preseason game. Look, that's one of the best preseason games you're going to see. Like, it was crazy. Had everything. And even the call by Joe Buck, I know you weren't at home watching it, but even the call on the field goal, he was in midseason form, you know, there. So anyway, great game. Snapped the Ravens win streak. It was fun. Got to see Sam Howell spinning a little bit. You had to walk away impressed there. Only, you know, downside to everything last night was Terry McLaurin going down with the toe injury. But outside of that, it was a really good night. And I think most in attendance felt like they got their money's worth. So that one was a lot of fun. Anyway, I digress. You guys get out of here. Have a good one. And again, I'll see you later on tonight. If you're not doing anything, come over to Rio's channel and come kick it with us. See you then.
Louie T Network.